Are you sick and tired of lame-ass social media? Are you tired of turning on the TV and being bored to tears? Well, never fear. Roundtable Philosophy is here to save the day, bringing you new and interesting podcasts each and every week. Let's get the party started. Tonight's topic will be about the injustice for all women. There's a story this week about a girl down in Panama City Beach. The girl was asleep on the beach, and these guys came by and they say they gang raped her, but I think one of our members did a little more research, and I think it just came down to groping and some other inappropriate type stuff. But either way, male or female, you don't really deserve to be mistreated at all, especially if you're in a state where you can't defend yourself and somebody comes along and does something to you. I think that is wrong. I'm pretty sure that the law would agree. You're not supposed to put your hands on other people without giving them consent. And even then, I guess if they go beyond that, you have the right to defend yourself or to say, hey, I don't want that to happen. But in the case of this girl, that wasn't what happened. And even though it might have been fondling, she wasn't in a state where she could say, I don't want this to happen, which kind of pulls up the story from last year about this couple that was actually having sex on the beach. And several people called the authorities because there were children, and the children were being exposed to this. They thought that it was inappropriate and that it shouldn't be happening. However, you have this girl who is being attacked by a group of guys, and nobody does anything. Nobody steps in. Nobody says, hey, that's not right, leave her alone, or anything like that. I don't really see the difference other than children being absent from this situation, which we don't know for sure. But the situation previously, there were children present. So I guess what makes it unacceptable whenever there are children involved versus when there's not? Either way, it seems more weight was put on one because children were involved, the other one not so much. There's obviously other situations where things happen and people don't step up and do anything. I don't know for sure what I would do in a situation like that. If somebody's being attacked and you do nothing, which is the greater offense, to stand there and do nothing or to leave your kid parentless? You never know. The situation may not escalate, but at the same time, what if you were in that situation? What if you were the one that was being attacked and you really need somebody to step in and help you out because you didn't think that you were brave enough or had the strength to really do anything about it? I guess that's why some people just want to turn a blind eye.
I'm pretty sure that no matter what culture you may come from, nor what type of ideology you may have, when you put your hands on someone, you invite yourself to retribution happening back to you from that person, or possibly from a witness, or even the government and those who follow and carry out the law. This is something that's been put out many times before in past generations, decades, and even centuries. That's why rape is considered a crime in practically every country that I at least know of. Same goes for sexual assault, at least for most civilized countries. Now, when I say to put your hand on someone, it can go both ways, whether it's physical or sexual. The fact is, everyone is entitled to a little bit of personal space or privacy. You can tell by the way that they put their hands on someone, whether it is sexual or a physical way. Sexual could be portrayed a little bit differently. Physical, either way, you know they're going to go either for violence or for their own self-satisfaction. It's not invited by any means to a woman or to a man.
Like you said, everyone has a right to their own personal space, and there are a lot of freedoms that we have, especially regarding speech. And speech is a little different than actual physical action, whereas speech is covered whether or not it offends someone, whereas actual physical actions that we're talking about here, if you're going to assault somebody, that's moving beyond your freedoms. You are then violating their personal space, especially with a sexual component. That's violating their privacy, and in many ways it can be traumatizing. So you're hurting them physically and emotionally. At that point, you're opening yourself up for intervention. You know, you don't have to physically intervene to stop something like that from happening. You can just call the authorities, call the cops, and let them deal with the situation and have more of a hands-off approach.
Do you believe that the situation we're in reverse, where it was women ganged up onto a man who was passed out like that on a beach, do you believe it would cause any more publication, much less wide panic and or anger throughout the public, do you believe it would be a much different situation being portrayed publicly, or do you think it'd be the same no matter what the circumstance?
I think it would be different because I think there's a huge double standard about men being victimized by women and women being victimized by men. There was actually an experiment that someone did where they had two actors basically play out arguments in public and see how people reacted. In one case, they would do the scenario once where the man was being the aggressor in the argument, and they did it again when the woman was the aggressor. And what they found out was that when the man was the aggressor, people were a lot more prone to getting involved. When the woman was the aggressor, it just so happened, I guess, that people were mostly just, they were either ignoring it or they were even cheering her on, because there's this idea that a woman being aggressive towards a man is empowering for her. And there's kind of a double standard, which, I'm totally fine with you saying that if a man victimizes a woman, that's horrible and that's awful, but it should be an even keel. You should not victimize anyone, no matter what your gender is, no matter what their gender is. And yeah, it does go largely unreported when there's any kind of sexual assault where the man is the victim and it's a woman doing it. Or there's even a lot of domestic abuse cases where the idea is, and there was an advertisement or something talking about domestic abuse hotlines, and the domestic abuse hotline for women was presented as, if your partner is abusing you, call this helpline and we'll help. And then the abuse line for men was presented as, if you're thinking of hurting your partner or if you struggle with anger issues, kind of thing. Even the way the hotlines were set up was very pro-women. So I think there's a double standard there, and I think it should be addressed.
Not to pull away from the topic at hand, but there's certain sites that play into this as far as like YouTube videos and stuff like that. And I'm going to go and call out like World Star, Hip Hop All Stars, or whatever the hell it is, and just put them on blast because they're posting videos about like gang beatings that people are just like videotaping for fun. As far as the videotaping goes of these incidences, I don't always see it as the person trying to protect the victim or anything like that, or get the person caught. They're videotaping it sometimes because they think it's funny or fun, and then posting it online because, haha, look what I just saw type crap. So I feel that there are certain sites that glamorize both the sexual assaults and the physical assaults that are going on. And one of the things I was wanting to talk about is like the knockout game. I know I haven't heard anything about that recently, but that's been something that's been going on for the past couple of years, and you see videos about it all the time. And it's usually on Facebook or YouTube, where they just like randomly post these videos, and I find it utterly sickening. Had I been in that situation to see one of these actually happening, true, I don't know how I would react, because I don't know if that person's armed, and I would honestly fear a little bit for my own safety if I were to get involved. But I would do more than just videotape it and post it on the internet. I would at least, while videotaping it, call the police and let them know that this is going on, and provide them with the video directly at that time instead of just posting it online and hoping that something eventually happens about it.
Recent events reported by the BBC, which is generally where I get my news from. The BBC talks about how the Rolling Stone magazine covered an article about a fraternity in, I believe, Virginia, or University of Virginia or somewhere, where a female student was supposedly gang raped by 1 or 10 or all of the men in the fraternity. And so Rolling Stone did 2 or 3 page article discussing it, put it out there. It turns out they didn't interview anyone except for this one girl. After the magazine came out, the police got involved. The police did a full-scale investigation and found out all of it was fake. It was all made up. There was no credible evidence. None of it was true. It's difficult when you hear situations like this because everyone is told X% of women will report. Most cases go unreported. Well, that may be true. I don't know anything about it. I've just heard that statistic. I'm sure you've read it on a billboard someplace. But when it does get reported, if it's a false report, it destroys credibility of all reports, even not in the same area. If you were to say there was some sort of sexual assault report in a university happening today, because of this Rolling Stone article, there's going to be a lot of people, male, female, anyone, who are not going to give it its due credibility. Now, I would be interested to find out how many reports are faked for sexual assaults vice car theft, vice regular assaults, vice any sort of other crime, to see if it's statistically the same number or if it's higher for one than the other. But it's really shameful when a large magazine destroys the credibility of women in general, especially on or around universities, and that's a shame. And it looks like they may be sued, and I hope they get taken for everything they're worth, because you can't interview one person and then slander an entire organization. That's just unacceptable.
I was hanging out with two of my friends one time, and I forgot what happened, but I think he was tickling her, and she started yelling rape jokingly, and that kind of just killed the mood, because he instantly went from joking around to more or less dead serious and got really angry. He said that's not a funny thing to say, because all it takes is for some woman to say rape and a man's life is destroyed. Whether or not he did it, it's going to be she said versus he said. Obviously, you're going to need some evidence, such as a rape kit test or something. But still, you mentioned the Rolling Stone doing that article, and that girl made up the story. How many times does that happen? Do you hear, whether it's in movies or TV or the paper or whatever, where some girl met a guy, they hooked up, and he didn't call back, or maybe they dated for a little bit and he just blew her off or whatever, and to get revenge, she says that he raped her, and now he is under the scrutiny of the police, and his personal life is being torn upside down. Everything is just falling apart, because what's going to happen? He's going to go into prison. If his lawyer is good enough, maybe he can get out of it. I don't know what the statistic is of rape charges to convictions, but I'm fairly certain, if they have evidence, that would definitely be almost an open and shut case. And it's unfortunate that there are times where people make up stories, but they have to do their due diligence and they have to investigate it. And if your lawyer can't disprove that you did it, you're screwed. And that's really not the way that it should be. I think that people really need to evaluate the words that they choose to use and the things that they say to people, especially when you have stuff like the Rolling Stone. That's what sparked the conversation with Jim and myself earlier. He was talking about that as well. And it makes it really hard for women to come forward, because now they're going to see, oh, well, this girl made it up. What's the likelihood that people are going to believe me now? Because it's already difficult. I mean, the women already feel ashamed. They already feel like they've been violated and everything's been stripped from them. And it more or less has. It takes a lot of courage to come up and say, I was sexually assaulted. But when you have these kind of stories going around and other people doing things of that nature, you're just ruining it for everybody who legitimately has a story and legitimately has a case that needs to be resolved. And it may not be looked at with the same respect or urgency, because you have all these people crying wolf.
I understand the whole bystander thing. It actually makes a lot of sense. There's actually a lot of cases that I personally saw when I was in Savannah. It's almost like everybody's so intellectually crippled just by constantly playing with Facebook or YouTube, that if they see somebody getting jumped, or they see a girl being harassed, or like you were speaking about earlier about the knockout game, when people see that, it's aggravating, because honestly, there should be no reason in hell there should be 30 different YouTube videos showing that same assault. Nobody put the camera down. Nobody, ran over there and tried to break it up or help. They just let it happen, and it is aggravating. And I'm not even sure if any of you guys saw it, but there was it happened in Russia, but there was a video that I saw on Facebook about a month ago. It showed a lady and her husband were arguing. They all knew that he had beat her a lot. That's it's kind of like their relationship. She hits him, he hits her. Well, she's trying to leave, and her brother comes to pick her up. Well, he beats the brother up, and then he pulls out a 3-inch blade, and he literally stabs her like 38 times. And literally, there's 7 people standing around filming it with their phones. They're not trying to break it up. They're not trying to help her. I mean, he's stabbing her to death, and they're just sitting there like giggling and talking about it, and they keep filming it. And it's like, are you serious? Like, if that would have been around here, somebody would have ran and just football kicked him in the damn face. You know what I mean? I don't understand how somebody could let that happen. And to let everybody know, she survived. And no, he didn't go to jail that I remember from the video, at least. Like, cops showed up, and they did tackle him down and arrest him. But later on in the video, you see him smoking a cigarette off to the side with one of the cops. And it's like, are you freaking serious? And the only thing that saved her is a guy pulled up on a moped, and she literally ran to him. And she looked like something out of a murder scene. I mean, like out of a horror movie. She was covered in blood. I mean, half her face was hanging off. I mean, it was ridiculous. And he's still trying to stab her. And while he's trying, he grabs her and pulls her back to the ground, starts stabbing her again. Well, nobody helps. The guy on the moped just takes off, Well, finally, some bystander runs out and starts field goal kicking the guy in the face. And pretty much he kicks him off of her, and then they hold him down till the cops arrive. But I don't understand that. Like, what honestly, like, can anybody answer what the hell is going on with this generation? Everybody is so quick to film like somebody, kicking a puppy or, throwing a cat over the bridge or something. Nobody uses it to film like a beautiful sunset or to sit there and see somebody saving a deer, that's stuck in a mud pit or something. Like, you just don't see that anymore.
Do you believe that the generation and how it handles these events now is based upon a failed parenting by our previous generation, by our parents, due to a lack of discipline or through the way things used to be done when it came to actually raising kids and teaching them right and wrong? When I was younger, my parents had no guilt beating my ass if I did wrong, and I think that made me a much better person than most of my peers in my grade and my age group. And I'm wondering what all of you think in regards to that. Do you think this is really a downfall of man, mainly because of how we are raised currently versus how we used to be raised? Or do you think this is just pretty much an advance of technology and a side effect of it?
In all honesty, though, Ryan, I honestly, it's hard for me to answer if it is strictly because of the whole generation of, oh, you whipped your kid, call the cops. That's abuse. I can't answer that personally because I haven't personally witnessed that. But I do know that getting whipped helped me, it kind of helped mold me a lot because I did a lot of dumb stuff. But when I came up, my neighbors, the neighbors would whip you. They'd whip you with their kids if you did something stupid. And then when you got home, then your parents whipped you too. It's just one of those. It was a frequent cycle of whippings. But I do believe that this generation is lacking a little bit of discipline. Because if you do notice, when every one of us were in school, when we were all in school, kids didn't show up and start shooting up schools, I mean, we were, and I'm saying we were in grade school, not when we, of course, got up and higher in high school, because we all know about Columbine. But thing is, I do, I honestly believe, a lot of people don't believe in the Bible, but I do believe that you spare the rod, you spoil the child. There's no reason for an 18-year-old kid to be pitching a fit, but I have seen that, multiple times, even when I was in school.
Wait, Brandon, but do you also believe that part of it is due to the evolution of technology and how it affects society as well?
Honestly, you would figure that with all the technology we have, everybody would get along easier, that the world would be safer, there's all eyes everywhere. I look at it as everybody, if you have a cell phone, you pretty much have your own CCTV, I mean, you can always record, take pictures of anything, but it's sad because with all the technology we have, since we should be 10 times safer, it seems like we're getting farther away from being civilized and we're going back more towards an actual, I guess you could say, almost like we're reverting backwards. That's how I think that the society is going nowadays, because we have so much technology that everybody's become ignorant. Albert Einstein even said, and I can't quote him 100% because I'm not as intellectual as a lot of you, so I kind of forget stuff easy, but he said, I fear one day that society will become more intellectually advanced towards using electronic, using stuff like that it'll actually make everybody dumber. You know what I mean? Like, technology will get so far advanced that we'll revert backwards and be, become ignorant.
So I disagree with what you're saying. The main problem, as it appears to me, and please correct me when you're wrong, jump in anytime, your problem is that you don't like the way people are reacting when they see a situation. They'll record it with their phones and they won't step in is the general basis. Well, I think we all learned in the early 90s, even internationally, because it was broadcasted every year as the way America does things, was the Rodney King situation. The Rodney King video showed the police beating this individual, Rodney King, and the video did not capture the entire event. It only caught a portion of it. And these cops went away because the video evidence doesn't lie. Now, granted, it can be misleading at times, but it doesn't lie. The same with this recent shooting in South Carolina. The video evidence is a small piece of evidence which shows a small fraction of what happened. So the fact that people care enough to videotape, it's your silent weapon. It's the only weapon you have in a world where your personal risk is way too much. You can remain anonymous, and you can put it out there. So the fact that people are videotaping it is absolutely the best thing you can have. You're in a public place. There are public people there. You have no right to privacy to not be videotaped. So I fully encourage people videotaping everything they see that's inappropriate. On the extreme side of that, there was a period of time where in China, when the internet was first really introduced, they had the human flesh search engine where they would basically somebody would post, I don't like this person because they did XYZ. And then there was a huge, massive uproar about it. You had politicians who lost their jobs or government employees that lost their jobs because they wore a watch, because in the city they lived in, the average person didn't have enough money to have a watch. So it was immediately portrayed, look at the corruption. But then it got really violent really quickly. Somebody did something that was wrong, and then somebody texted it to somebody else and sent the video here and the image there. And then they actually went vigilante and killed several people in China for minor infractions like texting while driving or not picking up when your dog poops on the side of the road. However, the fact that people are videotaping it, to me, is a fact that we care, and we're doing the only thing that we, A, know how to do, and B, are comfortable. Because when it comes out, and it will come out, like that video of that recent shooting of that cop, that video doesn't lie. It may be misleading, but it doesn't lie, and punishment will follow. And that's what we believe in America.
I'm just saying, if there's already like one or two people videotaping that and you see that it's a life or death situation, I understand a lot of people are not mentally programmed to step in, and some people, you know, they'll fight or flight mode, and I understand that. It's one of those things, like, you know, there's just some people who are just meant to do certain things, and some people who aren't. And I wasn't the type of guy that would, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have stepped in and tried to help or anything before, you know, I joined the military. But then after the military, it kind of taught me to, you know, look out for everybody. You know, even if you hate this guy to your right and he makes you angry, if you see him getting assaulted, you just step in and help him. And not everybody's programmed that way, but like the situation with the guy stabbing the woman multiple times, that was horrible. It shouldn't have taken her to get stabbed, you know, over 40 times for somebody stepped in and tried to save her. And in all honesty, it shouldn't have taken that many people to videotape it. But at the same time, I do understand that there are certain times, like if there's a shootout going on, I can understand, pull your phones out and record it. I mean, who's going to go over there unarmed? You know, you don't know who started what. You don't know if it's self-defense or if it's a gang fight. Or I'm not having anything to do with that. I'm not trying to get shot for no reason, you know. And that's fully understandable. There is facts where a lot of times where people will actually sit there and they'll pick a fight with somebody, and even the witnesses are like, you know, the guy didn't want to fight, you know, the guy just kept messing with him, you know, and he's like, call me an N-word, like he was wanting to provoke a violence. Well, they said he didn't even, you know, the guy literally for like 15 minutes, you know, multiple different times he's tried to get away from the confrontation, but eventually snapped and he starts beating the shit out of the black dude. Well, all of a sudden, you know, his buddies want to pop their camera phones out and go, look, it's racial. Look, he's attacking him because he's black, you know, I mean, and it happens. But there is a lot of times where, you know, people will wait till it pops off after they started something, then they'll film it just to try to get a rise and to get hits on YouTube. You know, oh, look, white man beats up thug, you know, and the guy won't be a thug. He might be in Harvard. But the fact that he's black, they want to racially profile and say, oh, look, he's a thug.
So Brandon touched on one thing in there that doesn't get a whole lot of play in these situations, and that was mentioning that after he joined the military, what he would do in these kind of situations changes. Considering the way the human mind kind of works, that goes a long ways. There's a thing called the bystander effect, which is a field of study in psychology and social psychology that's been trying to figure out how these situations happen. You know, how do you have 100, 200 people standing around watching someone get abused or beaten in some way? And they have found that, based on a different series of research, that, you know, any type of training to prepare yourself for this situation that you do is likely to influence your actual behavior when it arises. So I think that's definitely onto something there, that if we wanted to change this behavior and if we wanted to make the bystander effect kind of go away, then we would have to actively train people at some point to actually make it go away. There's a comment that was thrown around a couple of times about the world being not safe anymore and other variations of that. I want to actually dispute that one, because all the evidence we see actually says the world is now safer than it has ever been in all of history, unless you're in one of the active war zones, which I always think is a little amusing, just due to the fact that it's safer than it's ever been, yet we're more worried about every little thing causing us harm than we've ever been as well. So I don't know if one's causal to the other or if they're unrelated or what. And to touch back on the question earlier about lack of discipline or if parenting has gone bad or something, I wouldn't agree with the idea that we're at a point where there's no discipline, but I would agree that we'll call them Generation Y for lack of a better term. The end of Generation X and the beginning of Generation Y are a bit less disciplined than previous generations. That doesn't mean they're necessarily, causing more crime or being, terrible people or up to a lot of mischief or whatever, but just as a general thing of discipline, they are less. There's a lot of ideas of why that may be the case. The one I tend to gravitate towards is actually promoted by the current Dalai Lama, and he's seen it as tied to the decline in religion in households. Not that religion is necessarily doing anything great unto itself, as in, that God himself is not causing an issue or not causing behavioral changes, but of the idea that a lot of people actually learn their system of ethics and morality from the church group and church environment. And considering we don't have a very good secular series of ethics or training course out there that's everyone's exposed to like they are in religious environments, his basic idea is that we need to start actually teaching what he calls secular ethics in our schools so that it can replace the lack of people who are actively attending church environments.
I was talking to Joey before about this because I'm an atheist, and as an atheist, I kind of have to deal with a lot of arguments from theists, and especially from Christians, who try to make the claim that without God, or without believing in God, you have like no basis for morality. And I was describing to Joey how secular morals work. For one, it's based on empathy, and that is putting yourself in the shoes of other people. So if you imagine what it would like to be someone who is being assaulted, and you imagine, hey, I don't like that, that would hurt me and that would not make me feel good, therefore it's something that you shouldn't do because it's actively hurting someone. And there's sort of also harming society and harming individuals versus being helpful. Secular morals is based on empathy and based on wanting to be helpful to individuals and helpful to society at large as opposed to harmful. And of course, harmful actions are mostly pretty easy to determine. Obviously, murder and rape and sexual assault is among the most clear examples. The idea is that, for the most part, secular morals, they require a lot of thought and they require thinking about each situation and empathizing with the people involved, and if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, or if it's bad for everyone involved. Whereas taking morality from religion, if you take it literally, it's more so that you're more or less taking orders from a holy text or from the God that you believe in and that you believe talks to you. And in which case, you're not making the moral decision for yourself. You're just going based off of what someone else tells you, either through the Bible or whatever holy text, or the person interpreting the holy text, or the God that you believe talks to you and that you talk to. Which I'm not saying people who are religious have worse morals, because I think in many ways people who aren't religious still use secular principles to make their decisions. They just attribute it to God. And it's my personal belief that what a lot of people's idea is about God, and especially people who believe that they talk to God and God talks back to them, my belief is that it's not so much that they're talking to an external being, but they're talking more or less to themselves and their inner conscience, like a Jiminy Cricket type situation. If Jiminy Cricket was just a figment of Pinocchio's imagination and it came from within. And that's just something I wanted to touch on because I get that argument a lot. Like, if you don't believe in God, where do your morals come from?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter who or what you pray to or what building you go to on Sunday or whatever day of the week or whatever book you want to beat people with. I think Nate had mentioned it a while back whenever he and Jason were going back and forth in a previous podcast. You have right and wrong. Wrong is something that is negative and not good for society. Whether or not you have religion there to say, oh, well, that's not religiously/morally correct, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, that shouldn't play a role. Religion is not a weapon. And I feel like a lot of people tend to use it that way.
Something that is right or good is something that will ultimately get you closer towards your goal. And something that is wrong or bad is something that will not get you closer to your goal.
The goal is to be a productive member of society. We're not always perfect, and sometimes we make mistakes, which is acceptable.
So I've got a couple of quick questions just to bring up. Is this something that we're only looking at now because we're seeing it because of social media and the ability to broadcast this on a multi-level scale? Or is this something that's been going on throughout history that wasn't really publicized, but now everyone has a voice and can broadcast their opinions?
I think back then that was probably a huge limitation to actually how fast word traveled, because back then rape wasn't a heavily reported thing due to the fact that it could actually shame the family of the girl that she belonged to. Because of this, I think that many were probably hidden just out of spite because of that. I think that's one huge limitation that we can't really say about that. But at the same time, I think now is even more important due to the fact that how exposed the news actually currently is. I mean, we can go onto so many news outlets, just going onto TV or going onto the internet for blogs or just for commenting on Facebook and such, making a statement about something and end up inadvertently reporting a crime that might have been committed, whether it's rape, burglary, another violent crime or not. We are now in the heyday of reporting crime due to the fact that everybody has a voice, and everyone that has any type of electronic device is capable of making a submission of an accusation or other things of that matter.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with, there's a Scottish comedian whose name is Billy Connolly. I listened to a very interesting interview with him where he talks about when he was a boy, he was sexually abused by his father, and he specifically he discusses how the biggest problem for him, in his view, being victimized like that, is how society portrayed it. After the event, people would tell him that his life had been ruined, or that his life was over, that he was permanently scarred because of it. And he gives a really interesting perspective on you can't say that, and that is an aspect that society needs to basically shut up about, is that it was a terrible event, but you don't want to pressure this victim into feeling like it was worse than the actual event it was. Now, that's not to downplay anyone who's ever been assaulted. That's not what he says at all. And if you get a chance, you should listen to it, because he basically says society needs to change their opinion. Not that it's wrong. It is absolutely wrong, but how we treat the victims afterwards on a healing basis.
There's a lot of a victim mentality, and it goes not just with people who are actual victims of crimes like rape, but a lot of people, they get harassed on the internet. It's almost to the point where you're a victim, even if what you're a victim of is so trivial that it's like not even a big deal. It's one thing to suffer harassment on the internet, but with rape, there's no easy answers, because you want to be able to get justice for the victims, because it's a horrendous crime. So you want to be able to get justice for the victims, but at the same time, a lot of it is very he said, she said, and it's hard to actually prove with evidence. In some cases, you can prove that a sexual act took place, but you can't necessarily say for sure whether it was consensual. People can get over that trauma and they can heal and get better. But on the flip side, you also have the accused to consider, because sometimes a rape accusation can happen and it's not someone reporting a rape that actually happened. It's someone who wants to get revenge on someone, like a jealous ex or something like that. And rape accusations, whether they're proven to be true or not, can completely just destroy the reputation and basically destroy the credibility or the life or the reputation of whoever's accused. So you have to focus on evidence, because on the one hand, you don't want to let all rapists get away with it by being afraid if an accusation is false, but you also don't want to live in this radical feminist paradise where you can basically get someone thrown in prison just by accusing them of rape, because you lower the standard of evidence so low that you basically just, as they like to put it, listen and believe instead of actually looking for evidence and looking to prove it.
So that's our show. Hopefully you found us entertaining. If not, send us an email and let us know. Go to www.roundtablephilosophy.com/contact. Fill out the form and give us your feedback. If you'd like, you can follow us on our Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/roundtablephilosophy. You can follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/RTPhilosophy. Other than that, just check out our site on a weekly basis for new and entertaining podcasts. Thanks so much.